It is also true, of course, that if one understands nature as nature, and this entire tradition springs from Thomas Aquinas' understanding of Aristotle, and Aquinas was trying to understand biology, he was trying to understand what actually is in nature, you would think that as Aquinas did, the modern church would be seeking constantly and emphatically to discover what science is telling us about what nature really is. And science is telling us, and has told us in the last 150 years, that there are not actually in the whole universe just two genders. There are many species in which there are intermediate genders. The human species has many people born as intersex. There are dozens of genders of grass. There are fish species that go from male to male in their own lifetime. And everywhere in nature, you see homosexual behavior, as Darwin saw it himself and then covered it up because he thought it was too outrageous to say, happening all over the place, in all sorts of species. And now, of course, in science, in study of nature, there are all sorts of theories about why homosexual orientation might be of evolutionary advantage, might have helped bonding, it might have been advantageous for human beings to have a group of people who weren't dedicated solely to rearing children themselves, but could actually be helping the community as a whole educate, religious duties, scholarship, all sorts of other things that actually gave these communities evolutionary advantages because they had men and women who were not dedicated solely to reproducing and bringing up children as a family unit. Now, we're at a stage of knowledge where we don't really know the resolution of all of these things. But what we do know as truth, as the truth of nature, is that this idea of male and female as the only definition of what the universe is about, as somehow some ultimate truth of which all variations must be banished, is simply not consonant with what we know about science and about nature. And if Aquinas were living today, he'd be studying evolutionary biology and psychology to understand what God meant us to be. I look at the world and the universe as a Catholic who believes in God as an amazing, varied, diverse, fascinating, complicated, beautiful place. And I believe that also applies to sexuality and to human gender. And I know what I do not know. I believe in what the great Catholic poet Gerard Manley Hopkins called pied beauty. The beauty of those who are freckled and different. The fact that the universe, in fact, requires diversity. The fact, of course, as we now know, the diversity of individuals and of genes is a strength. It is the driving force of human life and human civilization. My view is, therefore, again, by reason, not by feeling, this argument is over. The last desperate act of the people supporting it has been the decision of the current Pope to insist that gay people are simply, as he put it, objectively disordered, unquote. He doesn't quite explain why or how. He has even gone so far as to say that even if gay men are utterly celibate, if they obey the Church's teachings entirely, if they never have sex with another man, they still cannot be priests. His directive recently, in a last gasp of effort, is simply to say that we don't care whether a gay man adheres to exactly the same rules as a straight man in the priesthood. He is still somehow sick, too sick to serve God. In my view, that particular directive, which I think up until then there are some arguments that seem to fall apart, that itself is not an argument. It is an act of bigotry. It is an act of stigmatization. And this, by the way, and this perhaps is where feeling does creep in, by a church that is engaged over the last decades in the grotesque cover-up and commitment of sexual abuse of children at a greater extent than any other institution that we know of. If it were a secular institution, the police would have gone in and shut it down. But nonetheless, the hypocrisy and double standards of these individuals are not what I'm arguing here. What I'm arguing here is the argument makes no sense. And I tried most of my life for it to make sense, and it doesn't make sense. The second politics of homosexuality, you think, calm blue oceans, calm blue oceans, calm blue oceans. I want to just add, by the way, before we leave the Catholic topic, the Catholics I know, the people who live in the church in the pews, and the priests I know, are not like this at all. They're good people. They do great things. They love God. And they love their gay and lesbian brothers and sisters and sons and daughters. I'm testimony to that. My devout mother loves me as she loves my brother and my sister. And there is no way in which her love, or the love of my fellow Catholics and fellowship of my fellow Catholics, has been affected by this. I'm talking here not about Catholics. I'm talking about a hierarchy that is lost. Lost, sadly lost. But one day will find itself again.